in the space in front, remembering that his body is made of beautiful, radiant blue light, recalling the symbolism and feeling like you're in the presence of someone who has done what you aspire to do and who will serve as a role model for you and encourage and guide you to full awakening. And add the visualization of the 3 syllables and the very beautiful healing and inspiring light coming from them, the 3 places at Medicine Buddha, into your 3 places, and really feeling that physically, verbally, and mentally, emotionally feel that healing energy and feel it restore your inner strength, your inner fortitude. Then expand the scope and think of all sentient beings around you, the ones you like, the ones you don't like. Think of all of them in human form, and the healing white, red, and blue light sequentially going out to and into the centers of all the sentient beings purifying their physical, verbal, and mental defilements, healing all confusion and pain, restoring them to a virtuous state of mind. And so in this kind of visualization you can include all the people in chaotic situations, painful situations throughout our planet, throughout all of this samsaric realm, all the different beings. And in this way really remain connected to them, but connected in a good way because you're imagining the healing light going into them. So this kind of visualization really encourages your fortitude, your inner strength, no matter what is going on in the samsaric world around you. And then we'll add the recitation of the 3 syllables. Let's just do it one time for each syllable. Ah. 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 and reaffirm your bodhicitta motivation for listening to teachings, so that you'll make this a virtuous activity that will benefit yourself and others short term and for a long time to come. So they say that the bodhicitta is our best friend, who always supports us, is always with us, no matter what is going on. And if you think about that, that's really true. It means that whatever situation you're in physically, the bodhicitta can be your best friend there with you. And so that no matter what is going on in the environment around you, all hell may be breaking loose, your mind can remain firm in a positive state and even more determined on full awakening, more determined to help sentient beings than before. Okay? So with bodhicitta, we don't get discouraged. We don't fall into despair. Instead, we redouble our efforts because we know that chaos and misery have causes, and that those causes can be eliminated. If those causes, here I'm speaking about afflictions and karma, ignorance is the root cause. If those causes could not be eliminated, then yes, despair would be appropriate. But since those causes can be eliminated, pessimism and despair are completely inappropriate. Instead, we need to really redouble our efforts to work for the benefit of sentient beings in whatever big or small way that we can. So, although it might be wonderful to think that as we often dedicate, by myself alone, I will transform this world and lead all these sentient beings to a full awakening. Although we make those kind of unshakable resolves, to know that we do what we're able to do in the situation we're in, and that's fine, and that's good enough, and we don't need to think, I have to save the entire world. I mean, we have that motivation to be able to do it, but we don't get discouraged when we're not able to do it, because we realize that even the Buddhas that exist now, they have plenty of wisdom and compassion and skillful means and power, and they're doing their best. But the power of sentient beings' afflictions and the power of sentient beings' karma is very strong. So everybody does what they can, and we know it's going to take a while. Okay? So we have that kind of inner strength and fortitude, so that no matter how long it takes or what we have to do to be of benefit to sentient beings, we never give up. We never just throw in the towel and say, I quit. Okay? Because anyway, you throw in the towel and quit and fall to despair, and then what happens? Does that help anything? No, it makes everything worse. Yeah? So we've got to realize that, the afflictions are the real enemy, and not to just, welcome them in the house, serve them tea and cake, and say, do your job, afflictions. No, we want to, kick them out, lock the door behind them. Okay, so because of attachment to my body, even a small object of fear frightens me. So who would not revile as an enemy this body that gives rise to fear? Okay, so it's true, because we're very attached to our body and our life, then some even tiny thing freaks us out. Even the possibility of getting a tiny virus that we can't even see. It's like, yeah, let alone a thorn or, who knows what. We see anything unpleasant, we freak out, we scream, yeah, because so often attached to this body and afraid for what's going to happen to this body. So this is, this is natural in sentient beings. And the scientists say that it's a positive thing, because it is what protects us from getting hurt and getting harmed. That this reaction of fear and fight or flight actually protects us, yeah, and allows the species to continue, and so on and so forth. So they do admit that sometimes it gets out of hand, and our amygdala overfires, and we wind up becoming more violent and crazy than before. But it's interesting, because if you think, this body is created from karma and afflictions, neither of which are very good. So if the result, if the cause is kind of rotten, the result is not going to be desirable. And then why are we attached to this body? Well, just because of habit, and just because the conceptual mind that says, it's me, or it's mine. Yeah. And then once we're attached to this, once we cling to this body as I and mine, then we get attached to its pleasure, we get angry at what interferes with its pleasure, and then we know what happens from there. Okay, creating more karma, more disturbance, and so on. Okay, so that's why it's saying, that's why Shantideva says, who would not revile as an enemy this body that gives rise to fear? In saying that, Shantideva is not saying we should hate our body. Okay, he is not saying that, because from the point of view of the meditation on precious human life, this body is useful. It's the basis for our Dharma practice. We need to protect it and keep it clean and healthy and so on. What he's talking about is the attachment to this body that makes us create so much negativity. Okay, so he's not telling us to hate our body. He's saying, don't be attached to something that gives rise to so much fear. Okay, not being attached to something is not the same thing as hating it. They're two different things. If we're not attached to our body, bodhisattvas, the Arya bodhisattvas, and, Aryas in the here and solitary realizer vehicles also are not attached to their body, yeah, which means that, if their body gets hurt, they don't freak out. If their body dies, they just let go and, don't cling to having another body. They're able to die peacefully. So that's what non-attachment to the body means. Okay? It doesn't mean we wish harm to our body. Yeah? It means we're fighting the attachment, the mind that wants to pamper and self-indulge this body, and that becomes worried over every tiny thing that happens to it. You know how that is, isn't it? You have a pain somewhere, and it's crisis. It's our pain. Even, stubbing your little toe or getting bit by a bee or, who knows what, pulling a muscle. It just totally takes over our mind, and we can't think of what's happening with the rest of the world and other sentient beings. Okay, so this is the kind of thing we're trying to overcome, is to give us the ability to, without being so attached to our body, yeah, we keep it healthy, this kind of thing, but our mind doesn't get so narrow. Yeah? Are you understanding what I'm saying? How our mind gets narrow when we're attached to this body? All I can think of is, they're asking me to do this and I'm going to be crippled. I go into this environment where somebody has a cold and I'm going to die of pneumonia. And how our mind exaggerates and creates fear. Okay? Then 122, by wishing for a means to remedy the hunger, thirst, and sickness of the body, I might kill birds, fish, and deer, and loiter by the sides of roads to rob others. Okay? So here are the disadvantages of being attached to the body. Okay? So we're so hungry, we're so thirsty, that we kill other living beings in order to get food. When we kill other living beings, we create negative karma, which will ripen in our experience of a greater suffering than the temporary hunger and thirst that we're going through right now. Okay? Or it causes us, he says, loiter by the sides of the road. Maybe that's what they did in ancient India. Now that, people sit down in groups and plan plan how to rob somebody or plan how to mug somebody or attack somebody, Or actually, we don't even do that. You do it all by the internet. You create these scam websites and get people to donate to things that don't even exist, or to invest in companies that don't exist. Yeah, so, why loiter by the side of the roads where it's hot and dusty when you can stay in front of your computer and cheat people out of their money and rob them that way? Okay, so this is definitely a disadvantage of being attached to the body. Okay, we act unethically, which brings not only harm to others, but especially to ourselves. 123, if for the sake of its profit and comfort, I would kill even my father and mother and steal the property of the triple gem, then I would undoubtedly proceed to burn in the flames of the deepest hell. Gulp. Okay. But when you think, for the profit and comfort of this body, and in general our ego, our status, our reputation, due to our attachment to praise, our hatred for blame and disapproval and criticism, what do people do? They will even kill their mother and father, and even steal from the 3 jewels. Actions which create horrendous, unbelievable negative karma. And we see cases of this, don't we? You read the newspaper and you see cases of people killing their parents because they want the life insurance policy, or stealing the property of the triple gem. I mean, this happened during the communist takeover in many, many different countries, the soldiers and sometimes even the residents who called themselves Buddhists would go into the temples and steal things and sell them. Okay? So, this attachment does not benefit us. 124, therefore, what adept would desire to protect and venerate this body? Who would not scorn it and regard it as an enemy? Okay? So he says, who would desire, protect, and venerate this body? Yeah. So again, don't get it wrong. He's not saying that we should, torment our body and harm our body or kill ourselves or anything like that. That's completely not what Shantideva's saying. But what he's saying, this is a skillful technique, to look and say what, this attachment to not only my body, but my reputation, my social status, my approval, my possessions, all this kind of stuff. This attachment is killing me. So why should I indulge and pamper and protect this attachment? It doesn't make any sense. This attachment is this self-centeredness. These are the things that are the enemy. That's what the meaning of the verse is here. Okay? So when we see that, then we're able to step back and relate to our body in actually a much healthier way, and our mind doesn't experience nearly as much inner confusion about our body when we're not attached to it. Yeah? So try it sometime, when you're your mind is just spinning, creating all these horrible scenarios of what's going to happen to your body, how you're going to be dead next week, or if you're not dead, you're going to be out on the streets. And not only our body, but our reputation, nobody's going to speak to us again. We're going to be the lowest of the low. Our lives are going to fall apart. And how with that attachment, we just go, Gah! That attachment is the cause of the fear and the anxiety that we suffer from. So turn and see that attachment, that self-centeredness as the enemy, and drop it. And it's also very interesting, this technique I was telling you the other day of putting self-centeredness out there and giving all the pain and the criticism to the self-centeredness. That works very, very well. You do that. You give all the disadvantages. Give it all to the self-centeredness. Or another technique that I find very helpful when all these unwanted things fall down like rain is to say, this is good. Yeah. And you're not saying this is good in a sadistic way. You're saying, I'm a Dharma practitioner. I want to improve the state of my mind. I want to purify my negative karma and progress on the path to full awakening. Yeah? Somebody criticizes me. This is fantastic. Yeah? Because it cuts down all my conceit. It cuts down my hard-heartedness that can't feel compassion for others. So it's very good that somebody criticized me, or it's very good that somebody trashed me and ruined my reputation, because I'm far too attached to my reputation, and I do all sorts of things to get a good reputation and prevent a bad one. But a good reputation doesn't help me at all. Yeah, what does a good reputation do for you? Does it make you healthier? Does it extend your lifespan? Does it get you any closer to generating bodhicitta? Yeah, does it get you close to full awakening? Does the good reputation purify your negative karma? Does it help you create virtue? It doesn't do anything that's beneficial to us in a dharmic way. So somebody's ruining our reputation. I'm far too attached to that anyway. This is good. You know, without a good reputation, my practice will become more serious. It will become more sincere. Because when I'm attached to my reputation, that attachment contorts and pollutes and contaminates every virtuous action I do, because I do things so that I can look good in front of others. And so that I can try and convince myself I'm a worthwhile person, because if I can convince others I'm wonderful, then I might believe it myself. And all of that is total rubbish. We don't need all that kind of convoluted thinking. Yeah? So somebody ruined my reputation? This is good. Get rid of the conceit, get rid of the attachment to reputation. Now I can learn to be compassionate. Because now I'm one of the 99%. We always think we're part of the 1%. You know, not that, you know, that one, but, you know, our own 1%. Yeah. Yeah. But now, no, I realize I'm just like everybody else. There's nothing special about me. Yeah, I'm so glad I got criticized. So glad my reputation got trashed. Huh? If you really think deeply about this, this is very true. It sounds crazy, but that's because we are servants to our self-centeredness and our self-grasping. And they don't like this one single bit. But if you really practice it, it helps your practice. Yeah. And being somebody who's attached to reputation, I experienced firsthand the disadvantages of a good reputation. One time, I won't go, well, anyway, the story is, I was invited to give a talk. When His Holiness was teaching in Arizona, I was one of the evening speakers. So I gave this talk, so then people liked the talk. So the next day, at the break time in His Holiness' teachings, I'm trying to go to the bathroom. And I can't get to the bathroom because all these people are stopping and saying, your Dharma talk was so good, your Dharma talk was so good. And I'm sitting there like, let me go to the bathroom, it's urgent. And it's like, that's a disadvantage of a good reputation. You know, you're about to pee in your pants. So, you know, it was very clear to me then, good reputation does not benefit you for beans. Yeah. In fact, it's a detriment. Yeah. And I remember one time I was asked to lead a memorial service at Bill Gates's place, you know, his home and, you know, the whole big thing. And I came out of that and I was like, I'm so glad to be nobody. You know, I went for a walk in Discovery Park. That's the park near us, right? I went for a walk and I said, I'm so glad to be nobody. I can walk in this park. Nobody cares I'm walking in this park. Bill Gates and his family cannot take a walk in the park. You know? They can't take a walk in the park. They can't do normal things that normal people do because they have to have bodyguards and people want their signature and, you know, he's afraid his kids are going to get kidnapped and for ransom and, you know, it's like, I am so happy to be nobody. Yeah, being nobody has many advantages. Yeah, not only in this life, but it makes your practice much stronger. Yeah, I mean, I look at His Holiness, and I mean, His Holiness is fantastic, but he's not attached to his reputation. But I look, and he too, he can't leave the palace there and go take a walk in the street. Yeah, he can't do it. Even many of the High Lamas. You know, I was with the incarnation of one of my teachers one time when he was very small, trying to take him on a picnic. Oh my goodness, all these people coming up. He's like 5 years old. And like this. And, 5 years old, you can't even walk down the street. So it's and then they're all involved. I mean, there's this whole social structure of who can go visit who and who talks to who and your previous life and my previous life. And so that's how we're supposed to relate now. And you're a higher level Rinpoche than I am, so I go visit you, but I'm not allowed to go visit my friends who are lower level Rinpoches. And, it's very nice being nobody. Yeah? Sometimes we look at people who are famous and we go, wow, if I were famous like that. But think about what they have to go through. Yeah? Think about the people you're jealous of. And if you think, oh, if I were only like them. And then think what their life is like. And ask yourself, would I really want to have that life? Yeah. Would you really want to have that kind of life? I don't know. I'm happy. Okay, so reputation, praise, wealth, all that stuff. Big hassle. Big hassle. Have you ever stayed in somebody's home? They have a burglar alarm system. I'm very good at this. My parents had one at their house, and I kept setting it off. Not on purpose, but I was the first one to wake up. Maybe I opened the door to go outside. Or you stay at somebody's house and, they unlock the door and quick they have to run to the burglar alarm and turn it off. Otherwise it screams. It's so nice not to have anything that people want. Okay. Okay, so that was 124. 125, oh, this one's a good one. Here's how our self-centered mind thinks. If I give this, what shall I have left to enjoy? You know that one? Yeah? If I give this away, then I won't be able to enjoy it. Therefore, my closets are full of all sorts of things that I never use, that I can't even remember having, but I am terrified of giving them away, because if I give them away, I won't have them. And this goes down to those of us who like to save containers, who like to save cardboard boxes. Yeah, do you have your own little thing that you save that you are sure you're going to need, and it just builds up in your closets, but you cannot clean out your home and give it away because you're sure that you're going to need that cardboard box as soon as you give it away? All right, what else do you keep? Plastic travel, those are useful. Don't give them away. I use them again and again and again. Yes. Yeah, they fall in the thing of containers. They're very useful. We can't give those away. What else?
My father, who's 95, saves the red rubber bands off the Spokane paper.
Oh, I do too. Rubber bands are useful. They are, because whenever you need one, you don't have one. Yeah. He can send one up here. Yeah, he saves the rubber bands. Then he can make generosity out of rubber bands and create some good karma. Yeah, I always save rubber bands too. Yeah? What else do you save?
Old clothes.
Oh, clothes, definitely.
I'll fit in that one day.
Yeah, you can bring those too, because we wear our old clothes. We work in the forest, we do all sorts of stuff. You don't throw out your old clothes, because if you do, then you have to wear your new clothes when you're working in the forest. And you don't want to do that, especially when you only have 2 sets.
This is interesting. I've been looking at my library of Dharma books.
Yeah, our library of Dharma books. That, wall-to-wall Dharma books. How often do we read them? Yeah, we read maybe one book once, if we get that far. But our stack of books that we want to read but haven't gotten around to it, they're stacking up too. I have a stack in my room. But, we can't give those away. Yeah.
Several boxes of math paper and just classwork that's I don't know why I keep it. I'm not going to go through it.
Yeah, like old, stuff from classwork. Yeah, that bottle that stacks up and up. But one day when, you're in your 30s and your children are in kindergarten, you can show them your classwork. So don't you want to keep it? Yeah. I mean, when we went through the house after my dad died, we found one report I did in, 9th grade or 6th grade or something. We didn't even know it was there, but we can't throw it out now that we know it exists. Because it has sentimental value, right? Yeah? I was just going to say that. Children's artwork. Yes, all the kids' artwork that you have on your refrigerator. And it's been there so long that you also have your children's wedding photos next to their 3-year-old artwork. And your refrigerator is getting very crowded. But, you can't take down the children's artwork. Or if you do, you have to put them. That's why you save that cardboard box, to put the children's artwork in. Okay?
Photos and old letters.
Oh, photos and old letters. Oh, yeah. Especially old love letters. Yeah, we have piles of those until you get so mad at the ex that you go burn them. But now there's all sorts of burning restrictions. You can't even do that. You have to recycle them. Okay, let's keep going. Okay. But it's amazing how our mind works, isn't it? Yeah? Yeah? Okay, so if I give this, what shall I have left to enjoy? Shantideva says, such selfish thinking is the way of ghosts. It is, isn't it? This is how hungry ghosts think. Yeah, training the mind in being a hungry ghost. I think that's one training I've done too many times. I don't want to do it again. Then self-centeredness comes back. If I enjoy this, what shall I have left to give? Oh, that's not self-centeredness. This is the bodhisattva way. Yeah. If I enjoy this, what shall I have left to give? Such selfless thinking is the quality of the gods, of the divine beings. Okay. So that mind says, if I enjoy this thing, what am I going to have to create merit with? I won't have anything to give. I won't have anything to bring joy to other sentient beings by giving it to them if I use it. Yeah. Now there's another one in this. If I use it, wait a minute, not it's if I give it, what shall I have left to enjoy? But if I enjoy it now and use it now, then I won't have it in the future to use and enjoy. So we're not even here talking about generosity, but sometimes we can't even use something ourselves. Are you getting what I mean? Yeah?
The attachment takes on a life of its own beyond the object.
Yeah, very much. Very much. Okay. So if, 126, if for my own sake I cause harm to others, I shall be tormented in hellish realms. Why? Because we created this destructive karma. But if for the sake of others I cause harm to myself, I shall acquire all that is magnificent. Again, he doesn't mean that we deliberately cause harm to ourselves. That's not what he's saying. He's saying, if for the sake of others, I have to give up some of my comfort, or I undergo some discomfort, yeah, I shall acquire honors in it. I shall acquire all that is magnificent. So if for the benefit of others, I get scratched, or, my wealth declines a little bit or whatever, that's fine, because I'm creating virtuous karma by this. Okay? So I think of the people who jumped onto the subway track after somebody fell over into it. They probably got scratched up, yeah, jumping onto the subway track, trying to get off to rescue this guy. But that's the kind of thing, But if for the sake of others I undergo discomfort, I shall acquire all that is magnificent because of cherishing other living beings and working for their welfare. Okay? So we have to remember this. It sounds so wonderful when we read it here. Yeah. But when we're driving home and you really want to get home quickly, and there's somebody whose car broke down by the side of the road who doesn't have a phone, it's like, I want to get home quickly. Somebody else with a phone will stop and help that person. Yeah, we forget in the situation. Yeah, so this is why it all comes back to practice, training, repetition, familiarity. So that we look at this now and it brings waves of inspiration into our mind. But when the situation's in front of us, we have waves of fear and self-concern. So we need to get more and more familiar with this so that we really remember it in the actual situation. By holding 127, by holding myself in high esteem, I shall find myself in unpleasant realms, ugly and stupid. No, not me. Karma doesn't work for me. I'm above karma. That's what we think. By holding myself in high esteem, I shall find myself in unpleasant realms, ugly and stupid. Why? Because we're creating the karmic cause for it. Yeah? Conceit creates the cause to be born, in a lower rank. Yeah? But should this attitude be shifted to others, I shall acquire honors in a joyful realm. So if I, shift this attitude of showing esteem and praising and respecting other beings, then karmically it creates the cause to be well respected and in a joyful realm in the future. Makes sense, doesn't it? Yeah? If we go overboard in one direction due to our afflictions, but you can see it, if I'm conceited, I'm putting other people down. Yeah? So, of course, then I'm creating the cause to be put down myself. Makes perfect sense. If I respect others, and don't compete with them, then I'm creating the cause for others, to respect me and not have this kind of competitive relationships with other people. Do you think we can do this? In the 37 practices or the 8 verses, we chant these after lunch, where it talks about, this person who denounced you and you put them on the crown of your head like your supreme spiritual master, and somebody who trashes you in public, you praise them in public. It's like, that's almost the idea of doing that, Think of somebody who was so rude and obnoxious and mean to you. The thought of praising them to other people, it's like being, what's it called, eviscerated, like somebody sticking a knife into your gut. It's like, I can't do that. Not after what this person did to me. They don't have any redeeming qualities. Yeah, our mind is totally stuck in hatred. Who suffers from that? We do. But it's amazing, isn't it? I don't know about you, but when I think of those people singing their praises, especially the people I'm jealous of, to sing their praises, to praise them, to acknowledge that they're better than me, it really is. It's like, somebody's cutting me open and I'm bleeding to death. That's impossible. I cannot do that. So just like, I told you when I walked to the marketplace, how I would force myself to give 2 pennies to the beggars. This is one too that I force myself to do. Yeah. It's like, it's worse than pulling teeth, Pulling teeth, I fell asleep in the dentist chair during a root canal. I can handle that. Praising this kind of person, you push yourself, you nudge yourself, because this is giving pain to the self-centeredness. And self-centeredness is our enemy. So let's give it, let's make self-centeredness a little bit uncomfortable. If we're going to have that kind of attitude towards our enemy, let's do it towards self-centeredness. 128, if I employ others for my own purposes, that sounds like a good thing to do. Employ others for my purposes. Delegate all my responsibilities so that other people will do them and I will gain the praise for having them done. This sounds very wise, doesn't it? Yeah? Self-centeredness likes that idea. What's the karmic result? I myself shall experience servitude. Oops. You see how the self-centeredness deceives us? Yeah? Oh yeah, employing others for my own purposes? Good. I want to do that. But I don't like the result. If I don't like the result, I have to stop creating the cause. And I can't say, well, I'll do this and then I'll purify afterwards. You know how we do? This is negative. I'll do it and then I'll just purify afterwards. It's like, well, I'll go down this ski slope and break my leg and then I'll go to the hospital and have it fixed afterwards. Right. Okay. But if I use myself for the sake of others, I shall experience only lordliness. Okay? So if I devote myself for the benefit of sentient beings, I will achieve my spiritual goals. Yeah? And nothing is more important to me than attaining my spiritual goals. So not even, having the previous one, acquire honors in a joyful realm or acquiring all that is magnificent. That doesn't mean in this life, it doesn't mean in samsara. It means fulfilling our spiritual goals. So you see that to really do these verses, we have to hold our spiritual aims as the most important thing in our life. Yeah. If we don't, then these verses, they won't have the effect of moving us from our self-centeredness. Okay? But it's going to take time, isn't it, for us to really think that our spiritual practice and our spiritual aims are the most important things in our life. It's going to take time, yeah? Because we have to build up that understanding. We have to really reflect on the disadvantages of cyclic existence, really reflect on how it's possible to overcome it, you know? So it takes time. It's not going to happen quickly. And, you know, self-centeredness is going to fight back. It's going to fight back. Hook, line, no, not hook, line, and sinker. Teeth and nail.
Tooth and nail,
Tooth and nail.
as in claws.
Okay, what about teeth?
Well, maybe teeth and,
Cat. Though the cats have the nails, but
yeah.
teeth,
Well, sometimes it's said tooth and claw.
yeah, yeah. But
Attorneys say tooth.
oh, okay. Because I say teeth, you know, because I think of my niece who bit my mother when she was 2 years old, you know, and children bite, don't they? Yeah, parents, do your children bite sometimes? They do it one time and never again. Okay, so it refers to animals. Okay. Yeah. Tooth and nail. Anyway, it fights back. 129. Whatever joy there is in this world, all comes from desiring others to be happy. And whatever suffering there is in this world, all comes from desiring myself to be happy. That's the whole point, you know? So that's why, you know, he says the next verse, what need is there to say much more? You can't say much more after that. Yeah? All joy there is in this world, all comes from desiring others to be happy. Whatever suffering there is in this world, all comes from desiring myself to be happy. Yeah, what can you add on to that? It's clear, isn't it? It's clear. So what do I have to do? Yeah, I have to exchange myself and others. Which means, you know, when I say I'm most important, I cherish others, you've exchanged it. And the I refers to all sentient beings. So you're exchanging who is most important. Okay, what need is there to say much more? The childish work for their own benefit. The Buddha's work for the benefit of others. Just look at the difference between them. Clear, isn't it? Yeah, it's clear. Sentient beings who work for their own benefit, doesn't matter how rich they are, how famous they are, they're miserable. They're totally miserable. Buddhas, who work solely for the benefit of others, are blissful, peaceful, fearless. Okay? So 131, if I do not actually exchange my happiness for the self of others, yeah, I shall not attain the state of Buddhahood, and even in cyclic existence, shall have no joy. Okay? So if I don't exchange this craving for, you know, my happiness and the suffering of others, so you see we're leading into the taking and giving meditation here. You know, if I don't do that, then forget Buddhahood. There's no way I'm going to attain Buddhahood, because there's no such thing as a self-centered Buddha. You know, what is it they say? You can fool some of the people some of the time, but you can't fool all of the people all of the time. And we can't fool karma even some of the time. And we can't fool causality at all. Yeah. So if we don't exchange our happiness for the happiness of others, yet we still think that somehow we're going to attain full awakening because, we're special and none of those other things apply to us, then who are we fooling? Yeah, because even in cyclic existence, we shall have no joy. So, having said that, this does not mean that we become the savior of the world and that we go around and fix everybody else's problems and rescue them from their misery and essentially keep other people from growing up. Okay, so sometimes this is one way in which we misunderstand what bodhicitta is talking about. We become Mr. or Miss Fix-It. You have a problem? Let me fix your problem. Yeah, I'll give you advice. I'll do the job for you. I'll take the responsibility. I will interfere in your life as much as you will let me because it enables you to be lazy and irresponsible, which you like, and it makes me feel important and needed, which I like. True or not true? Yeah? So it doesn't mean becoming Mr. or Miss Fix-It. Yeah? Bodhisattvas, Buddhas, they work for the benefit of others, in a way that empowers us so that we can practice ourselves. Yeah, because nobody else can practice for us. And where we are a baby, we need to grow up. And if the Buddhas and Bodhisattvas just coddled us all the time, we would never grow up. Okay? So sometimes, we just have to, when we're on the side of, but can't somebody save me? Kind of, where's Superman when I need him? When we're in that mode, then to say, that's self-centeredness. I'm keeping myself as an infant when I think like this, I have talents, I have abilities. I can ask people for advice, for help.
Prove it to
What?
Prove it to
Yeah. So, we can ask, we can deal with this problem. We don't need a savior. And then when we're on the other side, we don't need to be somebody else's Superman. Zooming in. Oh, you're drunk again this morning and your boss is going to fire you if you're drunk. So I will call in and tell them that you have the flu. Isn't that called enabling? Okay? So this kind of thing does not help people. It hurts, especially I think for parents. It hurts more than anybody else to have to step back and let your children learn about life for themselves. Yeah? Because, since this little being was like this big, you've protected them. But when they're now yay big, you can't, they're not this big. They're adults. Yeah, they have to learn to be responsible, and they have to learn from their own mistakes. And it's hard to let go and let that happen. Yeah. But you have to know that as a parent, you did your best and you gave them as many skills as you possibly could while they were little. But you cannot control their minds and you cannot control them. Yeah? So you have to, you have to let go in some ways. And that's one thing, when you have to let go of your children. Another one is when you have to let go of your parents. When your parents are elderly and they make decisions that you don't agree with. And again, you want to step in and protect your parents because they're miserable and they're creating the cause for more misery, and they don't want to hear from you. Yeah? And I remember, with my parents, they're falling all the time. Mom falls, dad falls. One time they were both on the floor. The 911 in their community knew Adele and Bernie very well because they had to call 911 to pick them up off the floor many times. Would they move into assisted living? No, absolutely not. We are not discussing that. This is not happening. We are staying in our homes. Okay, it's your choice. I don't agree with it, but I can't control you. Yeah? Maybe you have this problem with your parents or your kids? Mm-hmm. Yeah? Difficult, isn't it? And there we are. Okay, so what I'm getting at is, we don't become the savior of Mr. or Miss Fix-It who's going to save everybody so that we feel needed and important. Yeah, we really have to think, what is going to help somebody else in the long run? Yeah? Okay, so I've been, in many difficult situations in my life, even after ordaining, especially after ordaining. Yeah. And my teachers did not step in and save me. In fact, sometimes they were the ones who told me to do whatever it was that was difficult. But, that's what made me grow up. Yeah. And I realize now that even though it was difficult, and it was that they trusted me enough to grow up. Yeah. If they didn't trust me, they would have said, poor little children, oh, poor little one. We know that those macho Italian monks are so mean to you. Come here, sweet dear. We will give you some chocolate and some ice cream and praise you and tell you how wonderful you are so you don't have to experience people accusing you of things that you didn't do. And no, they didn't do that. Yeah? There are more stories, but this isn't about me. As much as I would like to make it about me, it isn't about me. Okay. Okay, how many more verses do we have to? Oh, we're getting there. Okay, if I only be quiet. Okay, 132. Let alone what is beyond this world, because my servants do no work, and because my masters give me no pay, even the needs of this life will not be fulfilled. Okay? So let alone in terms of enlightenment and awakening beyond this world, if we don't cherish others, our employees aren't going to work, and our bosses aren't going to give us any salary. Because this is what happens when we're uncooperative. Okay, so even the needs of this life will not be fulfilled. 133. By rejecting the method that establishes both foreseeable and unforeseeable joy, I cast magnificent delight completely aside, and then, because of inflicting misery on others, in confusion, I seize hold of unbearable pain. Okay, so that is the disadvantages of self-centeredness. Okay, I reject the method that establishes both the joy that we hear about in the teachings and what we can't even imagine, the joy of spiritual realizations. We reject that. We cast aside the magnificent delight, the bliss of Buddhahood aside. And then, because we like so much to inflict harm on others to get our revenge or to get our way or to be right, in confusion, we seize hold of unbearable pain. That's called self-sabotage. And that's exactly what self-centered mind does. Self-sabotages us. 134. If all the injury, fear, and pain in this world arise from grasping at a self, then what use is that great ghost to me? I mean, these verses, what can you say? They're, it's like, this is why I love Shantideva. He's in your face so much that there's no way you can argue back. If I do not completely forsake it, I shall be unable to put an end to suffering, just as I cannot avoid being burned if I do not cast aside the fire I hold. So if I cling on to the fire, the afflictions, the self-centeredness that burn me and cause me pain, but I cling on to them as if they were the source of my happiness, what's going to happen to me? I'm going to burn. Yeah? So, what do I need to do? I need to put an end to my suffering by getting rid of those things, counteracting them through cultivating bodhicitta and the wisdom realizing emptiness, based on renouncing cyclic existence. 136. Therefore, in order to allay the harms inflicted upon me, and in order to pacify the sufferings of others, I shall give myself up to others and cherish them as I do my very self. It's the only alternative. Yeah? Do you see how Shantideva leads our mind in this way? So even though we may not be able to actually do this now, he's leading our mind so that we can see the reason for doing it. So that as we go through and contemplate these verses sequentially, we build up, even if it's in the protection of our own meditation hall where we're completely safe, we're building up the energy and the thought to counteract the source of our misery. Okay? So we're preparing. It's like, how children dress up as, being this or that? Because if you can pretend to do it and dress up as doing it, then when you're an adult, maybe you can actually be what you dressed up as and pretended to be as a child. Yeah? Remember when you put on your mom and dad's clothes and I'm going to be a grown-up. And so you imagine it. What you can imagine, you can become. So even if we can't do this outside of the meditation hall right now, at least inside of the meditation hall, we can think about this, we can follow it, we can say, yes, that's what I'm going to do. Definitely I'm going to do that. I'm going to cherish others as my very self. Yeah? And so it's like practicing, training the mind, going in that direction. Yeah? And so we keep doing it again and again and again and again, and then it starts to build up as a habit. And then we can really, it starts affecting our life outside the meditation hall. Yeah. It might even affect our life inside the meditation hall when somebody else takes our cushion. We can remember, if I don't give myself up to others and cherish them as my very self, what's going to happen to me? Let them sit on my cushion. That's wonderful. That's fine. 137. I am under the control of others. Of this mind you must be certain. Okay? In other words, instead of being under the control of our self-centeredness, we're going to be under the control of the mind that says the happiness of others is important. And here, when we're talking about the happiness of others, it doesn't just mean, that they want flowers and they want to go to a Chinese restaurant or an Indian restaurant and not to the deli. It doesn't mean just giving sentient beings that kind of happiness. What the kind of happiness we're talking about giving sentient beings is going to come from being able to lead them on the path to full awakening. So that's why we need to progress on that path and attain full awakening ourselves. Okay? So when we're thinking of benefiting others, don't just think of, I'm passing out chocolate bars. Yeah, to everybody who wants a chocolate bar. Yes, that's fine. But you don't give chocolate bars to people who weigh 300 pounds because that's harmful to them. What it means, and for all these people, whether you give them chocolate bars or whether you give them a glass of water, the big kind of help we want to give them is being able to share the Dharma with them. And so, as ordinary beings, how do we're aiming to be Buddha, where we have all these incredible powers to be able to benefit others. But even right now, we can benefit others. Yeah, we give them Dharma books. We show a good example to others. We live ethically. We try and practice fortitude and not fly off the handle. And as I tell people, if you really want to impress your family with how good the Dharma is, take out the garbage when you go home. Yeah? That's better than many, many words to your parents. Do things that your parents have asked you to do around the house, but you haven't done. Show them you care. It doesn't take a lot of energy, and that's where we start. Yeah? But we're not limited to that kind of kindness. We're trying to think also of the larger kindness of helping people be free of cyclic existence. Okay, I am under the control of others. Of this mind, you must be certain. Now accepting for benefiting every creature, you must not think of anything else. In other words, banish all the self-centered thoughts. From 138, for my sake, I should not do anything with these eyes and so forth, which I have left at the disposal of others. So I have given over my body, speech, and mind for the welfare of others. Thus, I should not do anything with my body, speech, and mind solely for my own benefit. Because I've given my body, speech, and mind to sentient beings for their welfare. Yeah. When we do the mandala offering, we give our body, speech, and mind to Buddhas. So either way of you look at it, to think, I'm going to sneak some self-centeredness is like you've given something to the Buddhas or you've given something to sentient beings, and then you're saying, I changed my mind, I'm taking it back. Unadvisable. Okay? So it is quite incorrect to do anything with them which is contrary to the benefit of others. And then 139, thus sentient beings should be my main concern. Whatever I behold upon my body or my reputation or my feelings, I should rob and use for the benefit of others. Yeah? So any good thing I have, I dedicate for the benefit of others. Again, this does not mean we make ourselves suffer and deprive ourselves, because if we do that, then we become a basket case, and then then it's even harder on other people. Okay, so we have to take care of ourselves, but we take care of ourselves for the benefit of others, to keep our body healthy, to keep our mind balanced, so that we can use these to be of long-term benefit to sentient beings. Okay, and that's the stopping place.